Good evening and welcome. This is a meeting of the Special Education Advisory Committee of the Halton District School Board for Tuesday, November the 1st, 2022. This meeting is being held online in response to COVID-19 precautions. In accordance with Ontario Regulation 463-97 and guidelines effective February the 1st, 2021, HDSB promotes community engagement and participation by having processes in place for members of the public to ask questions. A Google form was attached to the agenda distributed in advance of the meeting and is also posted on the HDSB SEAC website page. Questions posed during live stream meetings of SEAC may be answered during that meeting, particularly those related to agenda items, or at the following meeting at the discretion of the chair. For efficiency, multiple questions that are similar in nature may be grouped together at the discretion of the chair and/or vice chair. Questions will not be attributed. Notation will be made that multiple people ask the same question. Any questions that contain language that is hateful or discriminatory will not be considered. So first, we're going to start with a roll call to record who's in attendance. So please answer yes or present as I read the list. We're going to start with the trustees. Tracy L. Harrison.
I'm present. Hello.
Heather Gerrits.
Good evening, everyone.
Joanna Oliver. Not yet. Okay. And I understand that Margot will be coming a bit later. So we have the association representatives and alternates. The Association for Bright Children, Yarlene has provided her regrets. Is Jen here? No. Okay. Autism Ontario, Lisa Cameron. Community Living Burlington, we have Nadina.
Present.
Easter Seals Society, Melissa. Or Sarah?
Yes, present. Good evening, everyone.
The Halton Down Syndrome Association, Sophia. Or Rebecca. The Learning Disabilities Association of Halton Hamilton, I am present. And Diane van den Bosch.
I'm here. Good evening, everyone.
And Voice. Erin?
Present.
And is Kathy here? No. Okay, so we have members at large. We have James.
Good evening.
Diane Miller. And Lucille Morris sends her regrets. For board liaison, we have Colette.
Good evening, everyone.
And Lorna.
Hello.
And just for the minutes, we also have, so Jen has just arrived. We have ABC, that's great. So for just to note that we also have Kevin from staff, we have Sean Marks, we have Ian, I'm going to get this wrong again, Godet. And we have Alison, I'm sorry, is it Vader? Alison Vader? Yeah. Okay, as joining us by telephone. So they're staff members present today. So before we begin, we're going to start by honouring the land. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Attawandaran, the Haudenosaunee and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honour and respect the four directions, land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us. So our first step tonight is to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. Are there any modifications or amendments that anybody would like to make at this stage? If not, do we have somebody to put forward the motion? Okay, Sarah, thank you. Anybody to second? Tracy, That's great. Thank you very much. And does anybody have any, would anybody like to object to the agenda as it stands? No one being seen, the agenda is unanimously approved. Okay, now we have the approval of our October the 11th, 2022 meeting minutes. Were there any errors or omissions that anybody would like to bring to our attention? Okay, none being seen. Would somebody like to motion the approval of the minutes? Erin, thank you. And a seconder? Heather, thank you very much. Does anybody have any objections to the approval of the minutes as they were presented? Okay, none being seen, the minutes are approved unanimously as presented. Thank you very much. So tonight we're going to begin our action items, and we're very fortunate that we have Ian Godet and Alison Veda Ippolita here to present to us on AODA, or the accessibility. Oh gosh, I will leave it to you to me. I know the acronym, but I'm fumbling it right now. So Ian, you launch us into the AODA for tonight.
Thank you and good evening. Of course, our best laid plans have gone a little bit awry. It's a pleasure to see you all, and nice to see Alison's face on the screen. I know she's been dealing with some internet issues, so I'm going to try and present. With that, we've got two presentations for you tonight. The first one will be our multi-year accessibility plan for 2022 to 2027. And the second one will be an update on our annual accessibility status report for 2021-22. So with that, I'm going to try to share my screen. So hopefully you can see this. And I'm going to go into slideshow mode, so I think I'll lose you. And if I can get confirmation that you can see that.
Yes.
Awesome. And Alison, do you want to lead us off?
Yes, thanks, Ian. Thank you for having us, everyone. As Ian mentioned, we're going to be providing an overview of two reports this evening. The first one that we're taking you through is the multi-year accessibility plan. It's required by legislation under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, AODA Act. And what the legislation requires is that every employer with over 50 employees is required to have one of these plans. They need to review and revise the plan once every 5 years. And in doing so, they need to consult with people with disabilities and make the revision public. So that's what we're taking you through this evening. It's our 5-year update, which was previously the 2017 to 2022 plan. Next slide, Ian. This draft report that we're sharing with you tonight for input will be going to the Board of Trustees for information as well. And as we're later on this evening, we'll take you through an overview of what our annual report, and what we do yearly is report to the system on the various initiatives that have taken place every year, and it feeds into this particular multi-year plan as well. Next slide. The foundation
Sorry,
of
Alison, can I just jump in? Is everybody else seeing a change in slides, or is it just me that's still on the first slide?
I'm not seeing any change. It's still in the first title slide.
Yeah. Ian, I think you have to go into present mode.
Okay.
That's it. Great. Thank you very much.
Sorry about that.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was my phone or not, but okay. So the foundation for this multi-year plan that is in front of you is, again, the AODA Act. and also the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation, which sets out the 5 pillars that are required under the AODA Act. And the 5 pillars are information and communication, physical environment, employment, transportation, and customer service. Also within the plan, you'll see work that has taken place over the past couple of years in relation to the previous multi-year plan, and it also speaks to objectives moving forward that that the board will identify, remove, and prevent barriers for people with disabilities. Part of the requirement for, I don't see it on the next slide, Ian. Part of what the accessibility multi-year plan should do is link to the organization's multi-year plan in general. So this slide just points out 3 of the very specific areas that link right into kind of some of the objectives that you'll see throughout the report. Equity and inclusion, obviously, mental health and well-being, and learning and achievement. And these bullets are pulled directly from the board's current multi-year plan. So again, this plan will identify barriers for people with disabilities, and it focuses on these particular areas, again, linked into the integrated standards areas, as well as attitudinal system. A lot of the work that we do focuses on the stigma related to those with who identify with disabilities. So the plan was developed with the Accessibility Coordinating Committee, of which Ian and I are both co-chairs. And then we've listed here some of the various areas that are also part of that committee. And again, this is the work that is entailed in this plan is system-wide. This is not one department or one area. So it really is a collaborative effort of the various departments in the system that go to remove these barriers and identify them and seek to implement goals. Very high level, some of the highlights of past work that have been ongoing and continue to go and continue to move forward are staff training. Very broadly speaking, we have system level training that occurs for new employees. We have system level training that occurs on a 5-year basis as a refresher. And then we also have very specific departmental training that occurs that plays into our obligations under AODA. Of course, we have updates to our administrative procedures, and we review those as a committee. And of course, we also have an accessibility webpage and feedback form, which is an avenue to collect information on barriers from others, maybe community members, staff, other students as well, so that we can seek to understand and hear from those who have the experiences. Some other past highlights include employment accommodations. There's a well-established process in place for providing accommodations throughout the entire employment life cycle, from recruitment and interviewing right up until the end. Of course, we have transportation training as well, and we work with our transportation services department on that. And a major feat for our information and communications departments in the past year was that all of our web content conforms to level AA, and that was a requirement by the legislation by January 2021. So I like to make sure that we highlight that for those folks that implemented that and put the work into that. Over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Allison. And my apologies for my poor presentation skills. From the physical environment perspective, one of the areas that we work on, we continue to upgrade our washroom accessibility standards, increasing the number of universal washrooms we have in our schools. We've been adding doors and ramps and operators, which you'll see in the next presentation that we're going to present. I'm pleased to report that rather than just doing elevator renewals, we are also doing elevator upgrades. So getting rid of limited use, limited access, the Lula lifts that we have in our schools with full-fledged elevators. And of course, we continue to implement building infrastructure upgrades that support accessibility needs around fire alarms and strobes. And of course, we're also doing curb cuts and parking lot upgrades to make the site more accessible as well. In terms of the objectives for this year, we continue training is an ongoing component. We made the comment that we're in a bit of a maintenance mode in terms of some of the training that is ongoing for staff. We're going to continue with feedback process, reporting barriers, and accessibility issues around the work that we do. I am pleased to report that we've engaged with community members, are now members of our accessibility committee, and providing input into the good work that we do. We'll continue to work and address health and wellness of all employees through collection of data. And also we're looking to maintain an up-to-date accommodation admin procedures to ensure a consistent process for accommodating our employees throughout the system. One of the things I'm hoping to achieve this year, and we're actually got a tour tomorrow morning of Burlington Central, is looking at auditing our existing facilities to form a new baseline. There was one that was done in the past, but it is quite dated. And I think that's something that will help inform some of the good work we do going forward. We hope to publish some of the data from this audit in the form of key performance indicators or KPIs that help identify where some of our gaps are and how we can infill those. And then we're going to continue to address the stigma of accessibility through ongoing education to support cultural change and learning with our committee and hopefully the organization. So the next steps, we're in the first bullet there, sharing with the senior team yesterday, bringing this to SEAC tonight for input and comment. Do hope to take this in December, although that might get pushed to January as I'm looking to align the board reports coming forward in the new year. And then, of course, on the heels of that, after all of our trustees see that, we'll post that on our website. And with that, I think we're happy to take any questions or comments.
So does anybody have any questions? Sarah?
Hi. Thank you for the overview. I have a question sort of directed or about the changes to the physical environment or the upgrades. Has anyone with lived experience or who uses a mobility device sort of audited any of those upgrades? Because often, as you know, right, like you can put a button in, but it doesn't actually work for the person. It might be on the wrong side or that sort of thing.
If I could, yeah, thank you for that question. And that is part of why we invited folks to join the Accessibility Committee, was to give us some direct feedback. Post-pandemic, once we start operating in a normal world again, whatever the new normal looks like, I do hope that we can almost do a bit of a road show and take the Accessibility Committee to some of our schools to actually walk and experience the upgrades we've done so that we can continue to learn. I do have experience with this, and even though we have the best intentions, sometimes not having that lived experience, we do miss important metrics in terms of how functional these new installs are. So that is part of what we hope to gain from the community members that are joining, as well as I'll say the audits, and then further the hope that I have that eventually we'll be able to tour our facilities and get direct feedback from users.
Great. Thank you so much.
So I have a couple of questions just following on from that. Do we have students on the accessibility committee that are providing their lived experience and staff to get the full spectrum of input into decision making?
I'll say we certainly have staff, and I do believe we have parents with students with lived experience. I don't think we have any students currently, not saying that is something that we're closed to. Certainly would like to learn from them as well, but certainly we did add a number of members, which is already proving quite valuable, and we'll continue to look to hear more voices at that table.
Okay, sounds good. And the other question is, you mentioned about addressing the stigma and some of your education activities related to that. can I ask, is that mainly focused on staff, or do you have a rollout that is focused on eliminating the stigma around disabilities for our students?
So perhaps I'll start, and Alison, feel free to add to what I'm suggesting. So in terms of the stigma, I'll focus on two areas. One is, I'll say, what I've come to learn as a bit of a culture within our system around locking out elevators so that they don't get abused by students. That's something that I'd like to see culturally shift. We had this infrastructure to support those with needs and ensure that their human rights are supported. And certainly I understand the perspective that in some instances these assets have been vandalized, and then when they are needed, that becomes problematic. So I think we've got an opportunity to do some training and move that culture and change the way our system thinks about that. And then further, one of the great, very quickly, we've had a staff member that has been advocating, and we hope to put it on our next agenda around, I'll say, the undiagnosed, and geez, I'm forgetting the terminology right now, about staff with autism. The undiagnosed generation, or the lost generation, I think is the terminology that he used. To educate the accessibility committee around, while SEAC is a great committee that supports the students in our system, this individual's advocating for the staff in our system that weren't diagnosed early in their life and have had difficulties through their employment and their lived experience. And so Allison and I have both had the opportunity to meet with this gentleman and learn from him already, and we're hoping to bring that to our committee at our next meeting. Allison, I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that.
Well, I think, yeah, that's exactly right, Ian. And if I would just add that, broadly speaking, a lot of the training that the system, the various departments put out doesn't speak directly to one or the other, but stigma in general associated with anybody that identifies with a disability. So for instance, any staff training that goes out, it's not speaking just to staff, but more of a broad term of stigma. But we can take that back also to the committee, your question.
Yeah, because I've been asked at some schools to present on neurodiversity and just to explain to students about the strengths and weaknesses and the challenges and help students understand their peers. I just think this is a great opportunity for us to spend some time breaking down barriers in classrooms that many of our students with disabilities face on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's also true among staff, but I think, we have a responsibility as SEAC to advocate that, our kids all kids learn that difference is what makes us unique and as a community. So yeah, okay, thank you. Anybody else have any other questions? And I think then you have another presentation, yeah? Yeah. So James.
Yeah, I'm just curious. It's kind of following Allison's ideas. If you have done any surveys or polling, and I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to try like a oral polling, asking the questions, rather than necessarily having them written in private, simply because the literacy level might not be high enough to understand what they're being polled about. So maybe a debriefing and, explain what the poll was about, whether students feel stigmatized or whether they're getting use out of the various types of accommodations you put in place.
I'll say thank you for that question. I don't have an answer for that now. That's certainly something that we can take back to the committee, and that's where I do think this discussion will be interesting with the group to see what other opportunities exist out there. So certainly I'll take that explicitly in terms of, oral questionings as opposed to written surveys that I know many are being asked.
The reason I ask is because I teach in a deaf environment, and I can imagine if we were to do the same, and we don't, but if we did, that would be absolutely essential because of the literacy level. Some of the questions would be not understood, or might just, it'd be a missed opportunity. So that's the reason why I was just curious of how to unfold the act of trying to get feedback. How can you get the best results?
Thank you for that.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions before we let Ian and Alison proceed to their next presentation? Okay, no, not at this time. So Ian, thank you.
And I apologize. I'm set up to do this again in the same format. Over to Allison.
Okay, thanks, Ian. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the previous presentation, that report that we brought forward is every 5 years. What we are presenting to you at this point is the annual accessibility status report. So this occurs every school year. And it's really an overview of the specific work that took place in the system the previous school year. So I will try to be, I will try not to repeat myself. We will see perhaps a lot of the same themes, but it is a little bit more specific. And again, this entire report, the work that's done, is a collaborative effort through the Accessibility Committee as well. So the report will take us through the general areas where we look at barriers and goals that we've, or work that we've completed in the last school year, 2021, 21-22, excuse me. It also takes us through some of the work that we did in the employment area, the information and communication area, and the built environment. I will say that as far as AODA compliance goes, we are in more of a maintenance phase, as Ian mentioned previously. So a lot of the work is about continuing that work, maintaining that work, and seeking to go above and beyond that work. In general, the policies and administrative procedures that were reviewed or developed brand new last year that are relevant to AODA. We're working from home, disconnecting from work, accessibility standards for customer service, and substance use intervention prevention. So I think it will be no surprise to many people that, we've seen an influx in mental health and as we come out of COVID at this point. And so a lot of these procedures will play into the mental health of employees and staff and students, excuse me. Again, this is from a very general perspective, and certainly not an exhaustive list of the training that takes place in the entire system, but just pointing out a few of the very specific training that took place last year. Equitable hiring practices, which includes those who identify with a disability, accommodations, and ensuring that we are compliant with Ontario Human Rights Code. And we also do quite a bit of training with the new PVPs in those areas. Library resources did some training around their administrative procedures and the selection of their instructional resources. And then there was a program that was provided to all staff. I think it was in its second year, actually, the Ripple Effect program, and it goes to assist employees with their mental health if they wish to partake in that program. From an employment perspective, again, accommodations, this is a massive area in AODA and a large piece of the human resources work. I mentioned that we provide accommodations both through staffing and recruiting and the interview process, and as well as through employment. The ongoing work through the HDSB staff census continues to guide us and inform our decisions in much of the work that we complete. A few of the questions contained in the staff census were directly related to looking at the community and the general population of staff who identify with disabilities. That was released in last school year, I believe it was fall, that it was released, the demographic data. And so it revealed that we have about 7% of our staff population identifies with a disability. And it also broke it down into the various areas or disabilities that that 7% is comprised of. So the highest percentage was multiple disabilities, followed by mental health, again, which is what we're seeing and where a lot of our efforts are being focused on, which is why we also have a mental health audit that we're in the process of implementing, which will really have a proactive approach to mental health for staff. Again, we're looking at employment section, and it'll identify kind of some of where those risks are and how we can be proactive in assisting our staff in that area. And one of those programs is actually the mental health first aid program that we have looked into as of last year. We're working with a third party provider, and that work is going to continue into this school year. So you can expect to see an update again on the next annual report, because that's some big work that's occurring in the system as far as mental health. Information and communication. We do have an accessibility webpage and a contact form for anybody who would like to get in touch with Ian and myself or others. We actively monitor that page, and there's a form that individuals can complete if they have experienced a barrier, and we really rely on that information from others if they can complete that and share it with us.
Thanks, Allison. And yeah, and building on that, not only the forums, hopefully we will get stakeholder input now that we've got community members on our accessibility committee. So as I alluded to in the earlier presentation, we will continue to install barrier-free elements in various school sites. And so some of the highlights that I wanted to identify this year, and before I do, I want to just make a call out that, we did lots of exterior groundwork last year. We added 56 accessible outdoor learning spaces in our system, as well as some great work that was completed at TA Blakelock, for example. And they were highlighted last year, but I do want perhaps new members or members that weren't present when we did this presentation to acknowledge that we've made substantial gains in terms of our external grounds and outdoor learning spaces. So this is an example of before and after at EJ James, where we've added some ramps. And from my perspective, this is our main entrance. If we've got a step, this school becomes 100% inaccessible. So the mere fact that we've added a ramp here provides some great access into the school. And then we need to work on the continuity within the school to ensure that community members and students and staff alike can find the spaces that they need to get to within the school. For those of you that may or may not be aware, Aldershot Playfield is quite a distance below Aldershot School, and quite an expansive ramp is being constructed there to support, I'll say an individual student was the impetus for this, but certainly this is a benefit for the entire community, and we will be an accessible attribute for the school for years to come. We are working on internal ramps as well at some of our schools. So on the left at Oakwood, you can see the former ramp that did not meet code in terms of its requirements for slope. And has been upgraded and replaced with a new one that does. So again, we continue to make these installations throughout our system. One that I'm particularly proud of, our staff achieving, this is W.I. Dick, and the picture on the left actually shows I don't even know what you call it. It was a gathering spot. It was a recessed or a sunken kind of living room within a multi-purpose space within the school. And when we were looking at how to ensure the accessibility and safety of the space, we were looking at adding a lot of ramps and railings and trying to make provisions. And we came up with a much better solution to just infill it and have no need for ramps and railings. And so that's wonderful. And some of this work was delivered because of the need, again, of a student at the school. And on the right, you can see handicapped door operators that are there to support a student that is quite short. And I apologize if I'm not using the right terminology. And then, as I alluded to, we're upgrading washrooms in various schools, and this is just one example at Heritage Glen, where we've created a universal washroom for student and staff use. And so with that, again, we're happy to take any questions from the committee.
Great, thank you very much. I mean, some of those changes look wonderful. So are there any questions at this time? No? Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you so much, both Ian and Alison, for presenting to us tonight. It's obviously, there's a lot of work going on, and it's really wonderful to see that our schools are becoming inclusive, the spaces that we need to have to ensure that our children understand that everybody has the right to coexist in the same space. So thank you very much for your work on this AODA element.
Thanks,
so
Rob.
thank you. Yeah, great. So we're now at the point where we're going to go to another presentation. We have Michelle Bates, Manager of Student Wellbeing, who's going to present to us on some of their work. And I imagine, Dean, are you with Alison?
Yes, I will be for a bit.
Great. Thank you very much for having you both here. And I'm going to hand over to Dean and Michelle for presenting on student wellbeing.
Yeah, it's nice to see everyone. I'm the superintendent for the Student Wellbeing Department, and Michelle Bates is our mental health lead, you may be aware. And we also have 3 professional managers. So last year we provided a bit of an update on our student wellbeing mental healthy action plan, and Michelle is going to take you through. She is going to speak. I am not, but I will be here if there's any questions as we move along. So I'm going to hand over to Michelle.
Great, thanks, Dean. Hello, so nice to receive your invitation, and thank you so much. I'm excited to be here this evening. So I've got a presentation planned. So I'll just move into presentation mode. But please know that I'm looking for your feedback because I know I've got lots here planned, and really what I'm looking for is your feedback around really how we're going to spend the time and this time together, and it will make sense once I begin to share with all of you. So forgive me, let me go back to the beginning. You can see I was reviewing things in preparation for tonight. Awesome, that's great. Okay, so here we are, November 1st already. So just as we begin, just to share a little bit about myself. So you can see I have lots of interests. I love dogs. We have 2 dogs right now. One of them's a Nova Scotia duck toller, and recently a golden retriever puppy. You can see I love to be outdoors. You can see I've just recently taken up horseback riding in the last 6 months. A love that I had when I was a young person. I love to do dog agility, so I'm still doing that as well. I have a family, and my husband and I love to motorcycle. I like to share these things because I think when we think about well-being, it really is about getting to know one another, having relationships of warmth and trust, knowing one another as whole people. So that's certainly a message that we've been promoting and sharing throughout the board in terms of mental health and well-being with students. All right, so our colleague Michelle, she's an IPL. She plays a really key role, and here are some of the things she does. She was going to join us tonight, but wasn't able to. And so I'll speak to these things that Michelle would have shared. So for tonight, here are some, we've got 3 topics, and you'll see down there at the bottom, I'm really looking for some guidance around what topics you feel are important, which topics feel more important and which topics feel really important to you. And so I'm going to suggest that I think that the supports for students, staff, and parents, and the meaningful parent collaboration is where we probably like to spend the majority of our time this evening. So please feel free to pop that into the chat box if you would like, and that will help guide me. So just sharing a definition of mental health. So this notion about flourishing and thriving, it's something we want for everyone and for others, for all that we love and care about, support, and work with. I think I heard a little ding. Does that mean someone? No. Dean, are you?
Michelle, I just said, Michelle, that I agree. I think those things that you've highlighted are really important. I think
important ones. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Allison. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you. So just some context. Most times when we're talking about mental health, we tend to think about this mental illness, but really it's this continuum. As well, we know that it's not just a continuum related to illness, but also in terms of related to mental health itself, that flourishing, that sense of well-being and thriving. So henceforth, it's referred to as a dual continuum. And then here's just kind of putting it all together. So for example, we can, we're aware of and familiar, many of us, ourselves and or loved ones, have a mental illness. And sometimes there are times of good mental health in the presence of a mental illness. And sometimes there is the presence of poor mental health when we have an illness. And really what we like to see is moving into that wellness, place of wellness, whether we have an illness or not. And then on the other side, of course, is maybe not yet a diagnosed mental illness or no mental illness, but it doesn't mean that we can't be suffering. We can still have poor mental health, even though there is no mental illness. And ideally, we want to have good mental health. So we share this because sometimes it's been a very important messaging with schools to be thinking about our mental health and well-being strategy is for every student. So we want to be attending to and thinking about the students that are struggling. But you see on this particular slide, our real focus is on enhancing the mental health and well-being for each and every student in our schools. And then another key role for our schools, for our school staff, is this idea of noticing when something doesn't seem quite right. We also have a role to prevent, and we also have important roles of connecting and supporting when mental health problems are emerging or arise at school. I think I neglected to mention, so it is a good opportunity to say that this slide deck will be available to all of you, and I think it might even be linked into your agenda. So please feel free to follow along or refer to this later. So this is just a visual of our mental health and well-being strategy. Every board's required to have one. Our strategy is from 2020 to 2024 in 3 areas with these priorities. So we'll just dig in just briefly into a little bit of these 3 areas. So when we think about student mental health and well-being, our focus is on student mental health literacy. That's one of the priorities. And the second priority is on youth engagement. So on this particular slide deck, you're seeing lots of efforts and energies related to student mental health literacy. And again, these are hot links in this slide deck. Feel free to link onto that, or you can certainly ask me questions about it. You can email me, follow up as an email too. I'll put my email address in the chat box. And you may also find lots of these resources on the public part of our board's website because we created both a student and a parent well-being section. Another area in our strategy relates to our mentally healthy school and classroom activities. So you heard me mention about the whole person approach. That's in our BIPSA, in our multi-year plan, and it's a commitment we have. We know the importance of really understanding students as more than students, but as whole people, as persons, as humans. We also, and I'm going to share next, just about our youth well-being teams and just how important they are for mental health and well-being. You'll see some resources we're providing out to our schools. You'll also see this year a commitment in terms of a designated well-being goal as part of the CIPSA planning tool. We also have lots of PD learning that we continue to provide. I'll just note that we've launched this year an educator speaker series. Our next one is coming up actually in 2 days, where we're bringing in or inviting in speakers for about 45 minutes virtually after school to talk about topics for related to student mental health and well-being for educators. A couple of weeks ago, we had Noah Irvin. He's a young man from Guelph, and Noah was talking about he would have been traditionally seen as a student in risk. Noah shared quite candidly about having a nonverbal learning disability, suffering from mental health. He lost both parents to death, one to suicide, and just the impact that all of this had on his life, and how he right now is in a real place of flourishing and thriving, and that he credits the teachers and the public school system he was part of in Guelph for being helping him to be where he is today. So that's just one example of a speaker we had. It was really inspirational. And then you can see we also provide tip sheets for for teachers, educators. Here are some that I've just listed. Okay, so this slide is coming to you from a youth network. So schools were invited and encouraged to have a youth well-being team. Last year, we had close to 50 schools with youth well-being teams. And this year, it looks like we're probably going to approach almost double that number. So a lead educator invites any interested student to participate in a youth well-being team. And then we brought them together for what we were calling youth gatherings. The youth they planned, led, and delivered both their school level mental health promotion activities, but then also these networking meetings. And here is a screenshot of a Jamboard where students during the youth gathering were sharing the kinds of things that they're doing in their schools. And it's just so exciting to see these things designed by youth, delivered by youth, inspired by youth. Really exciting. This is just another example. This comes to us from TA Blakelock, and they did pictures related to their youth well-being team, and really exciting. So you can see the breadth and depth of the well-being activities that students are engaging in. And it's just, I have to say, it's heartwarming and inspiring and really exciting. So then our third area relates to mental health care and support. And this is where last year you were hearing about CYC, psych, and social work services. You may be familiar with the Circle of Support, which is our approach to understanding how do we support students. And every student has a circle of support with parent, their classroom teacher, and the youth at the center of that circle of support. And then depending on need, that circle can grow. We also heard loud and clear from parents that they're looking for information as well. So you can see that we have a parent video series. Maybe you've seen those videos, and you mentioned earlier about our parent mental health and well-being section, and then maybe some of you have participated and or delivered parent information sessions. So all these parent outreach initiatives continue. So just a brief reminder about CYC service. It's primarily at tier 1 and 2. And I think last year you might have heard around the details and specifics. It's really about mental health promotion and prevention, primarily class-wide work. They can also do some small groups, and then just a little bit of one-to-one work when it relates to a skill to teach and a goal to reach. Social workers. So I believe we have 30 in our board right now. Master's degrees, regulated health professionals, part of a professional college. So the primary role of social workers is both in terms of clinical therapy and support and attendance. I think what's important to highlight or share is that every school has an assigned social worker, and that we also have specialized roles. And so we're really excited to be welcoming and introducing an Indigenous social work role, and then also expanding with our equity and human rights team. The other roles that you're seeing, group, complex needs, and safe schools, those have continued on from last year. And then here's just another way of presenting and sharing information about the kind of groups that social workers are offering. Sometimes they offer these groups in connection to a CYC. You can see the individual services, and just that all importance of students now having the ability to self-refer. A lot of what I hope is coming through is hearing our intentionality to destigmatize what mental health is, to provide appropriate supports wherever we are on the continuum, and to reduce barriers. And part of that is very much a commitment to culturally relevant and responsive identity affirming services, and then also looking at ways that young people can access services. Okay, and then I think, but you'll correct me if you haven't heard this information about our 2 mental health psychology staff members. So their focus is on executive functioning. And you can see here on the slide the services that they provide directly to students. And then you can also see that they are providing service to schools. And again, happy to, if I can't answer your questions or Dean can't answer your questions, we're happy to take that back to our team. So then I think to zoom in on what Allison was saying. So the role of parents and this really meaningful parent collaboration. So we think it's really important when we're talking about the circle of support or any connection with parents and caregivers, that we're really clear in our belief that parents are valued partners. And at the center, in the orange center, it's an educator, the student, and their parent and caregiver. And we think that's a really important and key message. Some of you may have been familiar with, or you may have helped, connect us with other parents. But we conducted some focus groups, 14 in total, with real intentional outreach to parents. We were asking, for input related to how are we doing? What do you understand about, what advice can you give to us about meaningful parent engagement when your child, our student, has a mental health concern? Just want to recognize that there's lots of potential for the benefits as it relates to parent collaboration, and here are just some of them. And I want to highlight that for parents, it was really clear that when we partner well with parents, there's an enhanced knowledge and a reduced stress and stigma. Parents were sharing they feel when we partner well, there are stronger feelings of support. And the literature is pretty clear that for parents, when there is good partnership, it helps to improve mental health and well-being for their children and also for the family unit. And for staff, there's also these benefits. We know it leads to a much more comprehensive understanding of the student, the child's strengths and challenges. It does promote mutual respect and shared accountability, and it can reduce the risk of burnout for everybody involved. So literature review, I'm just going to touch on a few things. It is an evidence-informed best practice. We know it improves service delivery and student outcomes. And I love this quote about families and schools are equal contributors to a child's well-being. And we mutually work together in this kind of relationship that helps reach a common goal. However, when we're thinking about these parent-caregiver school relationships, we know that both to foster them and to sustain them, it does require the importance of nurturing that strong collaboration, but it continues to be a challenge. And this is what parents shared with us. And I really want to acknowledge with gratitude the vulnerability and the wisdom that parents who participated in the focus groups were sharing with us. So with humility, I share and bring to you some of their voices. Parents were really super clear. You know what? We are our child's expert. You may have good information, but we are their expert. We also hold the big picture. You see them as a student, we see them as a whole person. Parents really know their child's strengths and interests, triumphs, challenges, and frustrations. You're very skilled at noticing changes, and you've got really essential information on things that work and things that don't work. We also heard school has a really big influence. So when things are going well at school, it also means that things are going well for that child. And that means that things are going better at home for the family, right? You can take a breath. You can be happy because your child is happy. Parents were also really clear that schools and parents work together to help children learn and practice skills. We also have this opportunity for sharing resources and additional information, but we need to do this together. What else did we hear when we were inquiring about? Tell us about the nature of the relationships. What do you want us to know? And as parents, you were really clear. We need to have trusting and respectful relationships. Without that, there will be no meaningful engagement. We also heard very clearly your words of wisdom, that when we have welcoming, positive environments that are conversational and you can feel that staff are interested, that really helps to foster that willingness to work together. There's a sense that we're in this together. We all want to do this for the benefit of the child. Parents were really clear. School staff need to acknowledge that parents know their child best. And parents were also really clear that the relationship that teachers have with the child, with their children, impacts the relationship that the teacher and the parent then have. What else did we hear? A child's mental health so strongly attached to their identity. And so I'm really proud and excited of our board's work and focus on identity affirming and inclusive classroom environments, and how important that is that we're all doing that. Parents were really clear, shared lots of examples of how principals set the tone. You'll see lots in there around belonging and inclusion, safety, and how those essential conditions really help lead to mental health and well-being for children. And also parents were really clear, like, listen to our concerns, be receptive to our advocacy, make sure you're following through on the plans, and be open to feedback. And when you do all of that, that is when we as parents feel valued. So then we rounded out the parent focus groups by asking for recommendations. And I'm only going to highlight some of them here. But again, if you're interested in more information, please reach out to me. So this notion of communication, don't just talk to us when things aren't going well. Reach out to us ahead of time. That helps build that trust and that respect. And then when it allows parents to reach out when they've got concerns they'd like to share or questions they'd like to ask. What are you noticing at school? Here's what I'm noticing at home. Again, you see that real requirement. Work together and build these relationships. I really loved when one parent said, ask us about our priorities and goals, not just the priorities and goals of the school. Parents were also really clear that when we're inclusive and respectful in our approaches to decision-making and shared responsibility, this is when we're fostering that meaningful collaboration to signal we're working together. Really a beseeching to continue our work related to a culture of diversity and inclusion, finding that space and time and doing it more often for parent voice. They were really specific about inform us about available supports, and hopefully you see that reflected in those other resources I was sharing, the parent videos, the well-being section on our website, and the parent information session. Those are just 3 examples of the work we're doing to respond directly to the request. They were also really clear. Please continue to enhance the mental health literacy among teachers. Lots of parents were feeling like they're educating the teacher. And part of that, of course, is because you're the expert. There also was sharing a sense of frustration. We want all teachers to know these important things. And then also the request from parents to build mental health literacy amongst them. So I'll stop sharing because that's the end of the presentation, the formal presentation, but I'll hand it over to yourselves. Questions, comments, clarifications, and I'm just going to pop my email into the chat box.
Well, Michelle, I'd like to thank you, as always, for your amazing work that you're doing with the board. I've had the privilege to meet with you on a few occasions, and I really do appreciate everything you're doing to support our students. While we're waiting for a couple of questions, so I'll let people come up. I do have a couple. How many students are actually self-referring?
I understand it's almost 50% of students who are self-referring now.
Right.
And that would be at the secondary level. There's not yet a mechanism for self-referral at the elementary student level.
Okay. Just something that came up with a conversation with one of my clients' youth was a chat feature would be wonderful, where they could actually just in real time connect with somebody, or just a thought that our kids are used to quick responses. If they're feeling very stressed, how do I deal with this in the moment? So that's just a thought there.
Thank you.
Another question, again, I have, we're very lucky we've had VSS for some students who have really thrived in that environment. I would be interested to know how many of the students in the VSS environment are there with a mental health issue, because they've obviously have some reason they're not back in a regular school setting. My daughter's in VSS because of exactly that reason. And my question is, how do we support those students? I understand that VSS will not be running next year. That's my understanding as of right now. So how do we support those children that have really needed that escape from the classroom environment and the social pressures? How do we support those children as they have to reintegrate back into the regular school system?
Yeah, thanks, Allison. Really important questions. I do not have the number of students who have self-referred or been referred through VSS. That's probably information we could get. That won't answer the specifics of how many students in VSS are there with a mental health.
Yeah.
I will share that anecdotally. We are hearing from administration, from classroom teachers, that they are noticing that students are self-identifying as having mental health concerns. So that appears to be a higher number in comparison to classroom settings. We are also hearing that to confirm what you're sharing, that for some students, the VSS has been not a total reprieve from the stress of school, but a reprieve from some of the stressful environments in school. And I think that it does behoove us to be thinking about how we're going to support students if we're not going to be providing a virtual setting. How are we going to support those students to reintegrate? I know the efforts we've made to reintegrate a large number of students transitioning from virtual in, but I guess what I'm reflecting on is that students who are still in VSS and out of school for the traditional school for a longer period of time will have to take a really thoughtful and personalized approach to that reintegration.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have questions? I've asked a few. Anybody else have any questions for Michelle? Okay, I'm going to ask another one while I'm still here then. One of the things that you mentioned there is the groups that you have for specialized programming. I noticed there's nothing there for individuals who identify with disabilities.
Yes, that is something that currently is lacking. The psych mental health workers do offer groups related to executive functioning. So that when you say disability, I know that that's a broad term. So maybe you can help guide us in terms of, are you thinking about specific or particular disabilities or the general concept?
I mean, obviously I come from representing the organization for learning disabilities, but I imagine that gifted students are very similar. We have a very high proportion of students who suffer with mental health issues. And so while many of them may not identify with Asian communities or may not identify as Black, LGBTQ, they're still needing these supports, or maybe they identify from those groups, but more closely with their disability than they do with other exception or other marginalizations and equity and diversity issues. And I'm just wondering what kind of supports we have for students who really feel that their learning profile defines them more negatively than some of the other issues that they face.
May I answer that before you go to Erin, or would you prefer to go to Erin?
If you could answer that, that'd be great, and then I'll go to Erin.
So when I think about the CYC support and the class-wide, so again, thinking about all the students in the classroom, and it might be prompted by one or two students, but there's a class-wide approach. So I think that definitely there's been lots of work and efforts to, when CYCs are providing class-wide, to be looking at this from the lens of inclusion and special ed considerations. That's one of the resources we have. I recognize, though, that that's not a specific group just for So I want to make that distinction. And I believe that at the secondary level, it's our psych mental health workers who would be looking at from an executive functioning lens, but again, not suggesting that that's the totality of the other ability. So with your permission, Allison, I'd like to provide this feedback to our team.
Sounds great. And
Michelle,
Dean, did you have a comment? Yeah.
Yeah, Michelle, I was also going to add, although there's no specific groups, other groups that are offered, maybe not specific disability, would include the anxiety and other different topic areas that do cut across a number of groupings of kids. So just wanted to highlight that there are specialized other groups that target needs for students.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jen, I think we lost Aaron. He dropped off, but we'll get him back hopefully. Jen.
Thanks, Allison. I think to tag on a little bit of your question, just as we talk about groups for executive functioning, and again, thinking a bit in the gifted world, you mentioned this at a high school level. Are there any programs in elementary for kind of our 7s and 8s as they're starting to deal with, more stresses within kind of prepping for high school that may have some of these mental health issues that arise? Are there programs tied to some of those pieces that you mentioned as well?
There are, and thank you so much, Jen, for your question. Our department recognized that was a gap. So we know about the emergence in the middle school, and we really see an opportunity to support intermediate students. And so we brought in group evidence-based group programming that focuses on anxiety and low mood that our CYCs can be delivering in schools at a group level, and to do that on their own or sometimes in conjunction with a school social worker or even the psych mental health worker. So we feel really I guess excited is kind of a weird word. It's unfortunate that there is this need amongst the intermediate students, but we are pleased to be able to address this particular gap. We also have, we're in the process of hiring another social worker, and we have thoughts about ways in which we can use their role to, again, increase the mental health supports with a regulated health professional for those students in middle school. And as those details get better defined, we'll be sharing them out with our schools.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? So it's Nadina, yeah?
Yes, it is. Sorry. So I am new, so I just have a quick question. You guys talked about the importance of having parent involvement and having them participate. So what's kind of being done around like immigrants and refugees and that interpretation, language barriers? Is there any things that are being done around those pieces for families to have them be more involved, I guess, in their child's life at school?
Dean, it looks like you were leaning in to say something, or maybe not.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for the question. Outside of our department, you might be aware there is a welcome center in Milton, and along with the supporting families when they come into schools, there are settlement workers that families can access. A settlement worker can help connect families culturally to things that they may or may not know about the education system. As well, there are interpreters that all our schools can access, both elementary and secondary level. In terms of that connection with mental health, I might defer to Michelle to speak about any connections that might be there related to newcomers.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. So we specifically have a social worker attached to the Welcome Center, and she's certainly available to support families in these important transitions into schools, and also hooking up with resources both within our school board but also within the community. And so she's been in that role for a few years now, and we continue to see that as an important priority, supporting families immigration, refugee, human rights, migration, so on and so forth.
Perfect. Thank you.
Did I answer your question though?
I think so. I just wanted to make sure that that was something that you guys were, I guess, thinking about, because I know it's in our community for sure. It's we've seen an increase in refugees and immigration for sure.
Great, that's great. Does anybody else have any questions? No, well, I'd like to thank Michelle and Dean for joining us here this evening to present that work. It's, as we all know, it's incredibly important work. It's very concerning, the amount of mental health issues that our youth are now facing, our children and youth are now facing. And with that, as we know, it brings the whole family into that same position of anxiety and depression, and has a huge impact on our community. So very grateful for the work that you're doing, and thank you for presenting it here today. And we wish you all the best. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, have a good evening.
Great.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Okay, so now we're at item 3.0, which is the SEAC discussion and question period. Is there anybody that has any questions or topics that they would like to raise at this time? Tracy.
Thank you. Through you, Allison. It's just an observation. I should have made it when Ian was talking. I got to visit Oakwood last week and see the new outdoor accessible space in use, and children, students of all different abilities and learning exceptionalities out there together, zipping around this space, having a great time. It was day one, and so people were already really oriented, and I was really, really amazed. It was actually, yeah, it was great to see that, you know, the things that you have had input to as a group and the guidance that you've provided, and that the observations with students have been taken on board and are now manifesting in these projects at the schools. And yeah, it was a beautiful thing to witness. So I just wanted to share that and give gratitude to I should have done it earlier, but anyways, thanks.
That's great. Thank you so much, Tracy. Colette.
So Tracy stole some of my thunder. Thank you, Tracy.
Oh, sorry.
So I'm just sharing some photos. So this is the Oakwood outdoor area that you're referring to. And let me see if I can pull up the next picture. So you can see lots of, like Tracy described, lots of interactive areas, and definitely a space that will continue to be well used. And a very similar space was also placed at GM Denier's. So yeah, thanks Tracy for highlighting that.
That's lovely. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or topics they'd like to raise? Okay, if not, we're going to move to the superintendent's report. You've all received the report from Colette. I'll just ask Colette to give a brief overview, and then if there's any questions.
Absolutely. So first, I'd like to welcome Nadina Torek, our newest member on SEAC from Community Living Burlington. And I hope, Nadina, you're coming back for the next term, but we do appreciate you joining for this last meeting of this term. The grade 4 CCAT results the administration is now complete, and families will receive results in late November. And families also at this time will be informed whether their child meets HDSB criteria to continue on with gifted screening and or the identification process. So all of that's underway, and families will hear back. Families of grade 4 students will hear back soon. The IEP update, and I apologize, Sean, I didn't ask you in advance, but I'm going to ask you in a second to give a couple of highlights around the new IEP. But as you know, we transitioned away from LearnStyle and to Aspen for our IEP software, and it has been a little challenging, I will say, for our self-contained teachers and certs in using this new software. As with all new software, there have been some glitches, and so we do appreciate the patience of families in the short delay in getting IEPs home to families. But there are also some differences in terms of the format of the IEP, and I'm going to have Sean jump in and explain some of those.
Thank you. So some of the content for those that have received the IEPs, a letter would have gone home with them, and there's an explanation there as well. Structurally, it's very different from the previous IEP, but the content remains fairly similar to what we had in the past. A lot of the information was transferred over from previous IEPs from the previous system. So that information is still in our system and is captured. And of course, all those IEPs still remain in the OSRs for the students. So we haven't lost any of that previous information and the good work that's been done in the past. Some of the processes now in terms of getting the IEPs out to families and for the certs and the staff to prepare them are a little bit more challenging because of the newness. But one of the benefits of the new system is that it's tied into our overall student information system, whereas the previous software was separate from, so a lot of that information had to be manually transferred over each time the IEP was created. Now information is updated instantly when it's added into one spot, such as SIA equipment, those kinds of things. It's transferred over immediately to the IEP. So as always, it's a living document. It can be updated continuously. In terms of language, there are some things that we have to do now based on the new system. That the wording is different. One example is we use the term implement IEP, which is a technical word that we now have to use, which means actually activate it in the software system. So you might hear that as the IEP is now being implemented and think, well, what have you been doing for the past 2 months? That's the technical term. The actual implementation of the IEP and the students receiving the supports and accommodations have been happening since day one. The certs have been working with the teachers to make sure that's happening. So there's a little bit of confusion around language more than anything else. And our hope is, and our anticipation is that through the learning we've done with certs, we've had a number of sessions with our certs and our administrators to get them this information, that by the next go around, which should be towards second term, the end of first term, those little quirks of the new system will be ironed out and families will be more familiar with what they're reading, and will have an opportunity to address any of the issues that the first round are presenting once they're out now.
Thanks so much, Sean. A little hot off the press that the ministry has extended the use of tutoring support funds for school boards. So this is that first set of funding that was given to us last year and needed to be spent up to August 31st. Given the really short time frame to turn that around, many school boards, including our own, had funds to roll over. They were originally going to be given back to the ministry. They've allowed those funds to roll over. And so the team is just now discussing how to potentially use those funds while we're waiting for the technical papers of the ministry TPA that will detail how those funds can be spent. So that's good news. We're in the midst of hosting our CPP information evenings. That's our Community Pathways program for our secondary students that have exceptionalities in intellectual disability or developmental disabilities. The first of those sessions is this evening, so likely over, but we do have another one tomorrow. And families can reach out to their schools for more information about that. Or Sean, is that also on our website if families are looking for that?
It's on the internal website, so I would have families reach out to their schools.
To the schools. Perfect. And lastly, as I said, this is our last meeting for the term for this SEAC. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of you for your commitment to SEAC and more importantly, the commitment to our students and families. I've truly enjoyed working with all of you, and I have learned a great deal from this group, and I hope to see many, if not all of you, back again for another term. Don't forget that those applications are due by the end of the month, and that we ask new SEAC members to hold the date in January for the orientation, January 17th, I believe that is. So again, thank you for all of your work. I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Are there any questions right now for Colette? No? Okay. Well, thank you, Colette, for that. Any association reports at this time? No. Well, as I said to Lorna earlier on today, this is the first time that LDAHH is not going to be putting forward an update because we have some very exciting news coming later in this week. But you will have to follow us on Facebook or wait till our next meeting until you hear that news. So very excited to share that with you as we go into a new era at LDAHH. But unfortunately, I'm not allowed to say anything. Okay. Okay, so the trustees report, please.
Well, Alice, and it's kind of hard to follow along after that because not only am I curious, that's very exciting. So congratulations in advance. And I certainly do plan to follow along with LDAHH as well as the other organizations that have been involved in SEAC so very graciously to bring your wisdom as we move forward to our next phases as well. So we have a brief report for you tonight. The first one is just board meeting highlights, and we met as a group on October 26th. And at that meeting, trustees presented a variety of end-of-term reports. So if anybody's interested in learning about the governance work that's been done over the last year, and in some cases looking back over the term, we really wanted to document everything, so it would be there for the next group, and I'll include a link in our report. The next meeting is tomorrow night, and you may be interested in the long-term accommodation plan. So whereas last time we met, we were seeking input to that plan, and now that draft plan is going to be before the board for consideration for approval, incorporating that input that was received. So you'll recall that the plan addresses existing and projected accommodation needs. So it's from the LTAP, as it's affectionately known, that capital projects are identified and proposed through business plans to the Ministry of Education for funding. So that's things like new schools, additions, and in some cases also right sizing if, for example, the population has shrunk and the facility is way oversized. So those kind of things come out of the LTAP. But Ian, Fred, Thibault, who manages the planning group, they've really put a lot of heart into this revised document. So you'll also see things in there. There's key performance indicators, which are new, so including facility condition, outdoor learning spaces, and carbon footprints. And particularly relevant to this group is that they plan to also integrate accessibility considerations into their reporting as they collect that data over time. So it's heavy on infographics this time. So if ever you've been interested in that sort of planning tool, now's the time to take a look. We'll also include that link. Then lastly, we have a meeting, as I said, tomorrow night. Then November 9th, there's a special board meeting, and that's the final board meeting of this term. And then November 16th is the inaugural meeting of the 2022 to 2026 Board of Trustees. So that's super exciting. And I will hand it over to Heather.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay, a few things here. There's going to be an iSTEM open house in the evening of Thursday, November the 3rd. iSTEM schools, Aldershot, Viola in Burlington, Viola Desmond in Milton, and TA Blakelock in Oakville will be holding open houses for students who are considering the program. I can tell you that as one of our last trustee gigs, if you will, I'll be attending the Viola Desmond open house, and I know that Tracy will be at the TA Blakelock open house as well. Student trustees in the Student Senate. Student trustees Cindy and Ethan have been sworn in and are getting the Student Senate organized for the school year. They're working super hard to make sure that each school is able to designate as student senator, and they're following up to make sure that every school has one. Student voice is critically important, and they're making sure it's happening. The first meeting of the Student Senate has taken place, and the senators are able to sign up for different committees, including mental health and the environment. We want to, and I know that Colette has already said thank you, but we also want to say thank you to the SEAC members from all the organizations and the community. Your contributions to this board, the students and their families, and the support and supporters are so super valuable. We, all of the trustees, have learned a great deal from all of you, and we are very grateful. And as Tracy said, we will be following along later as well, because the work that you do is critically important to kids. And finally, Inspire Awards. If you've seen anything that inspires you or see someone that inspires you, the Inspire Award is given to an individual or group that is formally or informally associated with the Halton District School Board, who support our students and their achievements through exemplary, caring, initiative, innovation, and creativity. And it's a super easy application. Go on hdsb.ca, jump on there, put a little application in, and we'll take a look at it. Once a month, we look at these, and it's one of the best parts of being a trustee is awarding the Inspire Award. Anyway, that's all that we have for you guys tonight.
I would like to thank you as trustees, all of you, for your hard work on SEAC. I'm not sure, I know that Tracy and Heather will no longer be trustees, but I don't know who's going to be on SEAC next time, but we certainly thank you all as trustees for your hard work. I know it's not an easy job, and I know that over the last 4 years, nobody could have expected the challenges that you've had to deal with as you and the school system navigate a pandemic that nobody could have foreseen. So I wanted to thank you personally on behalf of SEAC for all your hard work and wish you all the best in the future. Thank you. So at this point in time, it's any committee reports. I'm going to go through the list of standing committees and see if there's anything that needs to be raised. So the Parent Involvement Committee, I'm not sure if we have anybody on that committee right now, but I'm just going to raise it right now. Parent Involvement. No, okay. We had a report from the Accessibility Coordinating Committee, and I know that Lou is not here tonight, so I'm assuming that there is no report for that committee. And then finally, Yarlene usually sits on the Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategy Steering and Advisory Committee, and yet again, we've had another wonderful presentation from that group tonight. So I'm not sure if there's any update on that, but I just leave it open for a few moments. Okay, so we're actually gonna skip item number 5.0, which is the next agenda or order paper. We are at the end of our SEAC term. And so again, as the chair, I'd like to thank everybody who's committed their time, volunteered their time to come and join this committee, to advocate on behalf of all individuals with additional needs in the school system, be they diagnosed or undiagnosed. And I'd like to thank our school staff and board staff for taking our thoughts and advice, and as we've seen, moving forward with some of those suggestions to create better policies and better environments for all of our learners. So thank you to everybody for being part of SEAC. As Colette said, I hope we'll see many of you going forward. You do need to get your application in if you're an association, if you want to stand as a member at large, and if there are people watching who'd like to stand as a member at large, please get your application in. Diversity of voices is always the most important thing. And so one of the things we have seen with the being online is the ability for people from a wide range of geographical regions to participate. And let's hope that that can continue in the future to some extent. But I want to thank everybody. And at 8:42, as we have now finished our agenda, unless there's anything that anybody else would like to raise, we are ready to adjourn.